So we want to move on and tell you this story now. You will have heard reports around Deputy President David Mabuza, some saying that he's been missing in action for at least a month or more. He has been in Russia for medical treatment since June and is set to return on Wednesday. We're now joined by William Gumede from the Wits School of Governance to share more on that story, his insights, of course. Professor Gumede, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So the word is missing in action, but is that really an accurate description of the current period in which David Mabuza has been absent, or perhaps does that apply to generally his style in terms of playing the role of deputy president to Cyril Ramaphosa?
Actually, there's actually such a good description, missing in action. I mean, his leadership as a deputy president since he was appointed has been a leadership of missing in action. And of course, one do understand, that perhaps, that his health has not been that great. But still, even when, he was up, his health was up to scratch, he was missing in action. He's been a missing deputy president. Also, the irony is that he actually goes to Russia, typically like many African leaders, who believe their own health systems are not trustworthy, that they have to go elsewhere to try now to go and get healthcare. I mean, what does it say about, and I know when ANC leaders say they want a national health service, when your deputy president actually goes outside to go for treatment?
Are we not being unfair on the deputy president here, Professor Gumede, in that has he really been missing in action? Have we not seen him around leading the political task team at ESCOM? Have we not seen him leading the political task team around vaccines and coordinating that, and issues around the South African National AIDS Council? That's the retort from people who say the media and the commentators are being unfair on the deputy president.
I mean, let's just take one of the things that you mentioned, the vaccine task team. I mean, what is the record on that? We've been struggling, the government has been struggling to roll out vaccines. It has been embarrassing, but not only embarrassing, it's of course deadly, because our government has been unable to deliver vaccines. And people are dying and people are getting ill, economy is suffering. So that really is a real life example of him being missing in action. If he's going to be in charge of our vaccine rollout, and look where our vaccine rollout is nowhere, then, we really have to hold him accountable then.
What's the balance? How do you strike a balance here? Because unlike the deputy president in the United States, you don't have a situation where, the person is on the ticket and is a running mate as such. But in this country, you have a situation where the deputy president is appointed by the president of the republic and plays a supporting role and performs the tasks that are assigned to the deputy president. How do you strike a balance between, if you are a deputy president, between not wanting to be seen to want to eclipse the incumbent president and show your hand and perhaps display too much political ambition, particularly in a political culture such as the one you see in the ANC on the one hand, but also being effective in your support of the president of the day?
It is very difficult in our political setup. I mean, we just have, Cyril Ramaphosa, for example, was in the same situation when Jacob Zuma was in the president. Where do you draw the line? Where do you assert yourself? Not to be seen to be upstaging the incumbent, and so on. But having said that, still, deputy presidents, they get tasks that they have to perform, and one can measure your performance on those tasks that you need to deliver. And clearly, from our current deputy presidents and those tasks, whether he has delivered there's a very big question mark. But we also have to say, in terms of what are the protocols around when you are ill? When do you make an assessment and say, well, actually, maybe I'm too ill to be the deputy president, and perhaps I should step down? I think these are things that he should now consider, and even the president should consider, and even the ANC should consider, to make an assessment, to say, in an honest assessment, is his health good enough to take a very demanding job as the deputy president? Should he step aside, perhaps, and allow somebody, with the energy to take charge? Because the country right now needs leadership. And we're not getting the leadership, the political leadership, while the country is in a crisis.
Yeah, while we're talking about his illness, Professor Gumede, the situation around him seeking treatment in Russia, you teased it out a little bit earlier on in this interview. What do you make of that, him seeking treatment outside of the country? There's one way of looking at it. It's that it shows a lack of confidence in the local health systems. But my understanding is that actually this has to do with his own worries about accessibility for those that he believes poisoned him in 2015. That perhaps the risk is not so much as it is not so much about the health system not being able to treat him, but rather he is within reach for those who poisoned him in 2015, and that whole intrigue that gets triggered by all of that, which for me, I don't know, it's a worry in any direction, because if we now have a political culture where leading politicians in the governing party worry so much about being poisoned and those who poisoned them being able to reach them even in state institutions, for example, one military hospital, we have to worry either way.
No, absolutely. I mean, it raised so many questions, of course. I mean, just the fact that the ANC has become so toxic that, its second most senior leader has to go to another country to seek medical help because he's afraid, and in his words, that, they may poison him and assassinate him. I mean, a party as toxic as that, of course, it's very difficult to them to preside over democracy if you're going to have that kind of suspicions from within. But it also shows you how divided the ANC is. And if it's so divided, it's very difficult to govern in an emergency. It's very difficult for a divided party really to lead our economic recovery and to deal with, the recovery also from the looting and arson. Because, the country's on its knees, the economy, politically we're unstable, and there's also distrust between communities. So we want a governing party that is united, that doesn't have this kind of divisions. So yes, it absolutely raised questions about the ANC's ability to govern if we have those kind of divisions and in the party. But it also says, sadly, something about our political culture. I mean, have we gone so down the bottom now that we have a political culture that is so violent, where senior political leaders fear for their lives? It's not good for our democracy. But there's also, of course, other kinds of questions. Why Russia? You must remember when Jacob Zuma, when he was pushed out, when he was asked to resign as president, he had a couple of demands, and one of his demands was, for example, that he should get immunity, presidential immunity from prosecution. His second demand was that Ramaphosa sign or agree to implement a deal that he, when he was president, signed with the Russians to deliver nuclear to South Africa. So, of course, Ramaphosa at the time, as we understand it, said no to both of those demands. So one must also wonder, I mean, are the Russians continuing really to campaign to have that deal implemented that was signed under Jacob Zuma? If Mabuza now comes back and let's say is healthy, will he now be have some obligations to the Russians to deliver, on that nuclear deal or on other issues?
Professor Gumede, thank you so much for your time and your insights here on All Angles on ENCA. Professor William Gumede there of the School of Governance at Wits University weighing in. It's intriguing, is it not? This whole situation around the Deputy President, David Mabuza, who is reportedly returning to work after, more than a month away in Russia seeking medical treatment. You'll know, of course, that this stems back to his time as Premier of Mpumalanga, where he says he let his guard down, I think in 2015, and he says he was poisoned during one birthday party in 2015. And he was unwell for quite a period of time in 2016 and was away for about 3 months as Premier of Mpumalanga.